Bobby Eaton passes away at the age of 62. And we're going to lead off the show with that because Bobby Eaton, you know, the Midnight Express is not just arguably the greatest tag team of all time. They might be the two greatest tag teams of all time. I mean, you could make that argument that the Bobby Eaton, Dennis Condrey version and the Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane version, if you want to split them up, they're two of the five greatest teams of all time. I mean, there's a lot of people that would make that argument, and it would be hard to argue with them. Um,
Which
and
of the
Bobby,
two do you prefer? I
you
don't
know,
know if that's an interesting question. I might have a hot take on that, but I don't know if I have a hot take or not on that. But who do you
I,
prefer?
I used to be a Lane guy, and over the years, I've started to lean more towards a Condrey guy. The thing about the two versions is, I think the Condrey version was more hard hitting and a little more nasty, particularly in squash matches, where the Lane version was a little more flashy. I mean, both versions took on the personalities to some extent of Condrey and Lane when you really look at it.
Yeah,
And Bobby Eaton was so great that he could fit in with either. I mean, even his work changed to some degree depending which guy he was teaming with. I mean, he always did the high flying stuff no matter what, and he really was an innovative and ahead of his time high flyer. You know,
oh, for
that's
sure.
one thing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
watching his
I
stuff
mean,
today and really digging in. Obviously, I've seen a ton of his stuff, but today it was really like, okay, I'm gonna focus, I'm gonna watch or whatever. And you hear that all the time from him. Like you know, when we say that about a lot of guys, like a little bit ahead of their time, a little bit ahead of their time. But he is a dude that definitely was like just a couple years ahead of his time. Because if he does what he's doing, you know, in the '80s, and it was amazing what he was doing. I mean, the stuff he was doing in the '80s was awesome. It was like, really, he's not, he's nowhere near like, he's not Rey Mysterio out there or whatever. But he's leaping around, he's jumping around. I mean, you could definitely see this guy fitting in if he still had the body and his body could hold up. Like 90s WCW cruiserweight division, you could absolutely see him fitting perfectly into that after his tag team run is done. Or yeah, who knows what could have happened. I mean, early 2000s WWF, you could definitely see him fitting in there. Like he definitely, and it's fine, like because he was exactly in the era that he needed to be in. But he is one of those guys that he was great in the early 80s, he was great in the mid 80s, great in the late 80s, great in the late 90s or the early 90s, and had his body held up, would have been good in the late 90s to the 2000s. Even as the working era would have changed, or the working standard would have changed, he would have still been great. I have no doubt about that. He could have adapted to anything. And like you're saying, even in the tag team, you saw it. He was a little bit more of a, brawler, a little bit more kind of,
rugged.
yeah, a little more rugged with the country stuff. And then you get Lane, and Lane's out there, and I prefer the Lane team because of that. And I like that. Lane will get it there. He'll throw a little side kick. He'll throw a little, jab in the stomach because he's got karate lessons, or not right. Karate background. Did Stan Lane actually have a karate background or no?
I
don't think he did either. Yeah, because like he would do like a somewhat mild kick, and be like, "Whoa, there's that karate background coming into play." And I'm like, I don't know, that doesn't look like a perfect karate thing. But no, I like that version a little bit more because they bounce around the ring, a lot of quick tags, little. I prefer that a little bit over the Condrey stuff. But like you said, both of them are just elite, all time great tag teams, and just what you get from Eaton when you watch him, especially today, I just kind of noticed it as well. His innovative offense obviously speaks for itself. We'll talk a little bit about that, but this guy could bump his ass off. And it's like when it was time for the babyface to get the comeback, he'd get in the ring there, and whatever they did to him, I mean, he is bouncing up and down and taking these huge bumps and landing on the top of his head and landing on his hip, and just, yeah, he was just incredible at selling. I actually prefer his selling to his offense, and his offense is incredible as well. So,
well, those guys could bump their asses.
oh
off.
my God, yeah.
But the Eaton could really fit in anytime in any place. I mean, you could plop him in 2005 Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could do that. You can plop him on Dynamite next week. And he just was ahead of his time in a lot of ways, particularly with the flying. A lot of times you hear this and you kind of just roll your eyes, but he really did throw a great punch. Like he's one of those guys who really had a great punch. I mean, you hear that thrown around, but he really had one. And as far as tag team work, he's in the conversation for greatest tag team wrestler of all time, with right there with Ricky Morton or Arn Anderson, who he was obviously in a tag team with, later in his career, and whoever else you want to name. Johnny Gargano is a guy who, at least on this show, we consider uh, one of the greats in terms of tag team work. You go right down the line, name whoever you want to name. I mean, he's right there again, top five greatest tag team wrestlers of all time. I don't think you get much dispute at all. When you're talking about Bobby Eaton, and forget tag teams, I just think he was a great wrestler. I mean, the guy was just a great pro wrestler.
Well, that's something I wanted to bring up. I'm sure we're going to go kind of over his career. We'd like to do that kind of beat by beat. But my real exposure to Bobby Eaton initially, and really my preferred wrestling style as well, is singles matches. Like I grew up in an era where tag team wrestling wasn't that important. I really started getting into wrestling by 96, 97, 98 when tag teams are pretty irrelevant in the major companies. It's all about the singles stars. It's all about the singles matches and all that sort of stuff. So for me, like I remember first seeing Bobby Eaton as kind of like WCW Nitro jobber. Bobby Eaton, or he wasn't necessarily a jobber, just kind of like lower mid card guy. I don't know if I'd consider him quite a jobber, but and then I would go back and watch some of his stuff, and the stuff that I am always gravitated towards. And yeah, he's an incredible tag team wrestler, one of the best ever, but I'm always gravitated towards his singles matches as well. 91, 92, 93. He's doing great stuff all over the place in WCW. And he'd carry that on until the mid 90s, because going back and watching old Nitros, there's a Nitro match with Rey Mysterio. And I invoked the name of Rey Mysterio earlier. Bobby Eaton goes, like, he's right there with Rey Mysterio, like peak, like 19-year-old Rey Mysterio. He's right there with them. There's just some awesome stuff. You dig into the Bobby Eaton stuff. Monsoon Classic has a bunch. You just go on YouTube and look up Bobby Eaton. Like, I implore you, like, yeah, of course, watch the tag team stuff. The tag team stuff stands out, but do not underrate this guy as a singles wrestler either. I mean, he is so good in some of those matches, and there's matches you could tell with guys that wanted to work with him. And I think that's always one of the biggest things is, there's singles matches that he probably doesn't deserve to have at the time, given his booking. Like there's an NWA title match against Ric Flair. There's like worldwide matches with Randy Savage. I mean, you think Randy Savage was going to pop over to worldwide and just wrestle whoever you told him he was going to wrestle? No, he was like, he probably got there and they said, all right, who do you want to work? And he says, Bobby, yeah, let's go, we'll do Bobby.
Well,
Like,
do you know that? Well, you know that Randy Savage and Bobby Eaton worked with each other when they were both young wrestlers.
Yes, yeah,
I
actually found out about that, and I need to find this. I don't know if anybody has this. Apparently, him and Eaton and Leaping Lanny were a tag team for a while as well. And I would love to see that in 1979 to see what those two dudes are doing.
That's going to be tricky footage to find. But Eaton was in. It's not just the Condrey Midnights and the Lane Midnights. How about the team with Coco Beware? How much of that have you seen?
I've seen very little. I know there was a bunch of it up today, and I kept stumbling upon it, and I was just like, but I need to watch. I wanted to watch this one. I want to watch this one. And I just gravitated towards Midnights and singles matches or whatever. And I should have watched more of the Coco stuff because I've seen very little. I've probably seen maybe a match or two, but not really enough to give any strong thoughts about.
I mean, the Coco team was considered one of the best teams of its time when it existed, and you have to search though. See, you got to search Sweet Brown Sugar too, though.
Yes,
because Coco was working as Sweet Brown Sugar for some of that run, so you'll get more results. Wherever it is you look for your matches, whether it's YouTube or Daily Motion or seedy, underhanded sites that we can't speak of. Make sure you search.
I just didn't, not to interrupt, but I was basically going down the list. Chad Campbell, who's at Big Boys Play WCW.
Oh, that thread is incredible.
I basically went through that thread and watched everything that I knew I hadn't seen. So it's at Big Boys Play WCW. We'll probably put a link in the show notes as well. It's Chad Campbell doing 62 Bobby Eaton matches you should watch. So it's just a little GIF and the date of the match and who's participating in it. But all you have to do is then copy that and search, and you'll be able to find most of those things that are on there. So
he's got some Coco Ware Bobby Eaton tag matches in that thread. I saw them.
Yes, he does. Yeah, and I unfortunately skipped those, and I should not have, but I did.
No, yeah, go back. I highly recommend that. And then even late career. I mean, I mentioned the team with Arn and all the Dangerous Alliance stuff is great.
Right. Blue Bloods stuff.
And then the Blue Bloods. How about Bad Attitude with Steve Kern?
I forgot about Bad Attitude. You're right. Yeah.
And that's another great tag team worker in Steve Kern. Another guy who was in a legendary tag team with the Fabulous Ones. And so it's kind of like a melding of two worlds. You've got the Midnights and the Fabulous Ones coming together. And I remember when Bad Attitude was put together there in 93, 94, whatever it was, Smarks were very excited about that because of that factor. It's like, holy shit, it's the fucking Fabulous Ones and the Midnights in one package here. Now I think they only wrestled on like mostly, the B&C shows, the worldwides and things like that. But there's so many little gems in those little matches on WCW Saturday Night and on Main Event and on Worldwide and all that. And I bet you, if you go through that, Can I run off some bad attitude wrecks off the top of my head? Of course not. These were TV matches from 25 years ago, but I remember watching them during their short run, which probably only lasted, 4 months, 6 months, or whatever it was, and enjoying their work in those little 6-7 minute TV matches. And there's probably some really cool matchups that people have forgotten about if you go back and dig that stuff up. So you could even any tag team he was in was interesting. I mean, now listen, you know, you want to bring up Jet Set with George Goulas, go right ahead. George Goulas, if people don't know, is one of the worst pushed wrestlers of all time. And Eaton broke in.
Had the right last name. Had the right last name for sure. That got you a lot of places. So
yeah, a lot like Angelo Mosca Jr. and and David Flair and Dominic.
Yeah.
You get guys like this that come every couple of years. Eric Watts is another one. You go right down the line. There's so many awful sons of wrestlers who were just atrocious. He was one of them. He may have been the worst. But that tag team, Jet Set, I mean, they were pushed. And really, that was, in Bobby Eaton's formative years. And he made a name in that tag team. And, eventually hooked up with Dennis Condrey. And, the original, there's been probably a half a dozen versions of the Midnight Express. The first Midnight Express, of course, was Dennis Condrey, Randy Rose, and Norval Austin. It was a 3-man team. Or was it Eaton? I'm getting confused now. What was the original Midnight Express? It was Condrey.
I think it was Condrey, Rose, and
Austin,
yeah. You're right.
Yeah, and then Eaton ended up with Condrey. So and then eventually with Stan Lane. Those are the two most famous versions. But he had other versions of the team over the years too. Of course, some people might remember Bodacious Bart and what was
Bombastic Bart. I think it was it Bodacious Bart or Bombastic Bob? I forget. It's one of the two. Who cares? Whatever. One of the
Bob Holly and Bart Gunn,
yeah, it was
undoubtedly the least memorable version, but it was managed by Cornett, and it's an official version. But so obviously not a lot of people remember Jet Set, but the Midnight Express, of course, through both versions had that great run there through not just Jim Crockett either. I mean, and this was something I just learned about a few years ago, but I didn't realize what mega draws the Midnight Express were in Mid-South. I mean, they were enormous draws for Bill Watts. And, they went through Texas as well. And they had matches against the Fantastics in Mid-South, in Texas, in Jim Crockett. And to me, I know everyone associates the Midnight Express with the Rock and Roll Express. And they, don't get me wrong, some of the greatest tag team matches of all time. But my stance on this because we've talked about it a million times. I prefer the Midnights versus the Fantastics. I just thought they had more exciting matches. And really, you're comparing all-timers versus all-timers here. So it's like splitting hairs. But I thought that those matches were just a little more dynamic and a little bit better. And they wrestled them in I guess they wrestled Rock and Roll Express in a bunch of different places too.
Yeah. They did stuff in Mid-South and World Class or whatever with them and Jim Crockett. Yeah, I think I know your stance, and a lot of people might be taken aback by that. But having watched a bunch of them, I'm kind of with you. And it's the problem with the Rock and Roll ones is, like, if I was there live in the building, I'd probably prefer the Rock and Roll versus Midnight Express because it's just molten hot. But as far as, like, we're nerds, you know what I mean? Like, when the bell rings and that sort of stuff. Like, Rock and Roll, I love Rock and Roll Express, obviously. But, like, you kind of get what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like, every match structure is kind of the same or whatever. And they're awesome. They're really, really cool. But you get a little bit more of kind of the nerdy in-ring work between the Fantastics. Whereas Rock and Roll, they don't really have to do much because all they have to do is, get beaten, tag, punch, huge pops. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty simple what they have to do. So they don't overcomplicate it too often, and nor do they need to. But I kind of prefer the Fantastics matches too between them. So,
and then towards the end of the WCW run, to circle back to the top of our conversation, they did get to work Babyface because then Paulie Dangerously brought in the original Midnight Express, Randy Rose and Dennis Condrey, to feud with Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. And that feud was kind of a dud at the end of the day, and it didn't draw any money or anything like that. But that was interesting because you got to see Cornett Lane and Eaton work as baby faces, instead of de facto baby faces like they were, a lot of different buildings and everything. So um, there was that feud, and it really it gave us a chance to see Cornett and Paul Lee have dueling promos, which is probably the most memorable thing about that feud. Um, so yeah, I mean, but Bobby Eaton, all the great tag teams. But again, I think what I don't want to get lost in that is he was just a great wrestler, period. I mean, he's a guy who was also a great singles wrestler. He wasn't like, this isn't like, I really don't want to tear anybody down, but it's not like what kind of career did Robert Gibson have outside of his tag team? You know what I mean? Bobby Eaton, no one, I don't think anyone considers Robert Gibson like a great wrestler, but Bobby Eaton was a great wrestler who also happened to be in a lot of great tag
Yeah,
teams. And
well, you mentioned even the other guys that we've mentioned. Think about all the guys we've mentioned so far, and they all had like whatever small little runs or whatever. But yeah, there's nothing. Stan Lane's single runs, as you said, Robert Gibson, singles runs. They're just not. Yeah, he had a prolonged one. He was a TV champion. He faced Ric Flair in that Clash of the Champions. I forget the number. I guess probably on the 5-star match game this week. The Clash of the Champions number that one was on, where him and Flair are in the 2 out of 3 falls match. And like I said, there's good Bobby Eaton singles matches until like literally like 1999. Like he's still out there. I think 98 or 99. I might be wrong on that exactly, but there's still stuff that's like really good. And you watch them, it's all on Saturday night, it's all on Worldwide, it's all on that sort of stuff, but there's some really good stuff there. But no, like in terms of stuff where he was actually pushed as a commodity, like 1991 when Condrey leaves and finally they just say, okay, we're not bringing you back, dude. After he came and went like 15 times, they just said, all right, you know what, just go away, like we're good. Eaton stuck around and yeah, he became a singles guy and won the TV title and bounced around and did some stuff with great matches with Arn Anderson. There's a few really, really fun ones with Arn Anderson you can find in there. As I said, Ric Flair clearly thought highly of this guy because he went out there and had a lot of matches with Bobby Eaton at the time. So there's a lot of good stuff.
I'm glad you brought that era of Eaton up, like that 91, 92-ish era, where Lane retires or leaves or whatever. And they give him the deal and he sticks around and you're right. He did have that's probably maybe outside of some super early stuff, his peak single stuff was probably from that era. And I'm just thinking about it. And I think, to also kind of bring it full circle, I think the original Midnight Express, Condrey, Rose, and Austin, I think they feuded with Eaton and Coco Ware at one point. Now that I think about it, as sweep, Coco Ware. Now Coco Beware to me. Now what I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. You never miss an opportunity to tell people how wrong they probably are about Coco Ware. So go ahead.
It is so unfair, the reputation he has, because he was a jobber all those years when a lot of fans were kids, and that makes an impression on people. And even his work as a jobber in WWF was great. I mean, the guy was great. But you go before that and examine his career. I mean, he is legitimately one of the most underrated wrestlers of his generation, Coco Beware. Whether it's Coco Beware, Coco Ware, Sweet Brown Sugar, however you want to slice it up. He was stiff when he had to be. He was nasty when he needed to be. Another guy who was ahead of his time when it came to flying maneuvers and agility and those sorts of things. Coco Ware would have been an enormous star in this era. I mean, because he was short and he didn't have size, and that was really the only thing holding him back. And that wouldn't have held him back at all today, his size. And he would have just excelled, and he could have fit right in, working indies when they were at their peak, or just like Eaton. He's the kind of guy who you could have slid in anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the thing with Coco,
them as a team and going back and finding them.
Yeah, the thing with Coco too is, and why he would survive in today is like, he's not he might be like somewhat short or quote unquote short for that era, but he's such a big dude, he's so wide or whatever that they would, yeah, he's thick. They would have totally figured out a way to use this guy. Like you can't, there's no chance in hell that like if he debuts in like 2003, 2004 or whatever, he's not like one of the biggest stars in wrestling for the next decade, because yeah, they'd be able to find a way to use him. It didn't matter how short he was because he was thick and he was wide or whatever. So no doubt it would have worked. And yeah, it is disappointing that like you never miss an opportunity to say it, but yeah, had he not had that run in WWF and had people not known him as the guy with the bird, like what could his career have been, or what could it have been? But it is what it is. So
You think about Eaton, he has been in some of the best matches of all time. I mean, think about this. You've got the War Games match,
yeah, I
which
was gonna say
people,
Wrestle War '92. He's in that one. I always forget that he's a part of that.
the tag team matches against the Fantastics, which there's at least two or three of those that are regarded among the greatest tag team matches of all time. The tag team matches against the Rock and Roll Express, where again, you could probably pick two or three that are regarded as among the greatest tag team matches of all time. The match against the Southern Boys that we just talked about at Great American Bash 90, which
Yes,
again,
yeah. So, yeah, Great American Bash 1990 versus Steve Armstrong, Tracy Smothers. Talked about. Unfortunately, he talked about a lot of those guys recently. So
again, regarded as one of the greatest tag team matches of all time. Am I adding any hyperbole to these? I mean,
no,
I'm not
no. I mean,
overstating them.
no. I mean, honestly, like you mentioned the Fantastics one. That I think the one that you're probably bringing up is the 1988 one. That one,
And I love the one in Texas. I love the one in World Class
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
talking about the 88 one that you're talking about is probably the one from Crockett, and then they had one. See, they had so many. They had a couple in '88 actually. Because isn't there one? There's one from the Great American Bash. That
Yeah,
might be
this
the
is
one you're
this,
talking
thi-
about.
no, this one is the one that this is on Cage Match. If you sort Bobby Eaton or whatever, 9.73 on Cage Match, 5 stars from Dave Meltzer as well. This is on April 26,
April
1988. I think
'88.
it's a TV
Yeah,
one. I think it's a TV match.
yeah, and then they had one on a Clash a few months later, which is also a legendary tag team match. So and then you have the Rock and Roll Express matches. You've got the match with the Southern Boys,
Right, yeah, that
and
Southern Boys one just let you know 8.58 on Cage Match as well. So it's not like, you might be like, oh, I love these. Everybody loves these matches. You know what I mean? These are, as you said, well regarded as top tier. I mean, 66 votes, 8.56. I mean, that means it's good. You know what I mean? That's a lot of no hyperbole then. That's definitely one. And yeah, that War Games match, obviously, that well regarded as the best War Games match. And I would argue the only really actually truly good War Games match. But people pretend that because of that match, because of that 1992 one, including Beautiful Bobby's abilities there, people all the time now think War Games matches are good when in fact most of them are shit and bad. So but credit to Beautiful Bobby, Larry, Rick Rude, Steve Austin, and Arn Mason for holding up the.
I'm trying to think. They had that TV match against the Fantastics. They had the Clash from Clash of Champions, and then they had Great American Bash too, didn't they? Which was another great match.
Yes, that was Great American Match in '88. Yeah, that one is very well regarded as well. 7.71 on Cage Match.
Yeah. So, and then they had a match or two in World Class against the Fantastics, which were also tremendous. So, I mean, this is why I say I do give that the edge to the Rock and Roll Express matches. I do. I give it a slight edge. Not that the Rock and Roll Express matches weren't great, because they obviously were. Probably the one that people like the best. If you're talking about Stan Lane, it's probably the what pay-per-view would that be? Wrestle War. Um, I should really research before we hit
You're fine. You're
record
fine.
on this.
Which one are you talking about here?
I think the best the most well-regarded Midnight Express Rock and Roll
Oh
Express
yeah, that
match
would be
with
Wrestle War.
Lane,
Wrestle War 90. Wrestle War
with
90.
Stan Lane.
Wild thing. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Now there's some Condry ones that people might like better than that one, but with Lane, that's the one I think people point to.
That Wrestle War 90 is the one that everybody brings up. There's one in '86 that I know is pretty well regarded, and that is Condry. And then I think there's it's two in '86. There's a bunch in '86 because they wrestle each other constantly.
What are you looking at, the cage match?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and I mean,
But Wrestle War 90 is the one that I always look to as like that is the pinnacle of Midnight versus Rock and Roll, which is it's got the years of work, and I'm sure there's probably some random one that somebody saw in like a random house show in Mid-South or whatever that was awesome or whatever. But like in terms of the one that is available and we have on TV and it was on pay-per-view and everybody saw it, I mean that's the one that everybody points to of like, okay, this is like the pinnacle of these teams facing each other is that Wrestle War 91.
I want to get the dates on the World Class matches against the Fantastics.
Okay, I got one of them. 6/30/1985 is one of them.
Okay, that sounds about right.
And then as far as the other one, I can dig. Unfortunately, it's looking.
And there one in May.
There's one in
There
'84 as well, September 1984.
should be one around Christmas that was really good.
Let's see here. I'm seeing a. I'm just on the match guide here, and unfortunately, it is pretty tough to figure out exactly. Yeah.
There's one on the network on the same episode of World Class TV where Shawn Michaels does a job as a young wrestler. It's a one-man gang, and there's it's a really great episode of TV. I can't remember the third match.
Let me see if I can. I'll see if I can find it for you.
And I don't know when that one was taped. I think they had a match at a Parade of Champions, which was also a great match. But anytime you listen to Cornette, they didn't like their time in World Class. They weren't making as much money there as they did in other places, probably because they were coming off that great Mid-South run where they were main eventers. And I know.
Remember how you said you thought it was on Christmas?
Yeah.
Is it the one literally on Christmas from Christmas Star Wars? Yeah, there you go.
That would be it.
That's
it.
It's literally on Christmas. Yeah, Fantastics defeat the Midnight Express. Christmas Star Wars.
It's a great match. Do you have what else when they broke that down into TV eps? Can you see if you can figure out? Because that's on the network for sure. I've watched it a million times.
Yeah, I see the dates are kind of weird here. There's a 12/7 between those two guys.
January. It would be like January. You know what? It's January 12th, 1980. What's the
1985?
January 12th, 1985. That's the date that's ringing a bell. I think that's when it aired on TV.
So there's one on 11. There's one on the 11th as well, but that's probably okay. No. Actually, I'm pretty sure it is the January 11th, 1985. Titles change. Midnight Express beats the Fantastics to win the titles.
What's the other matches on that show?
Oh God, let's see here. Because we're looking for Shawn Michaels, right? He was Shawn Michaels lost to the One Man Gang. That's it.
Yeah.
Terry Gordy, Ric Flair, Caravan Eric, Chris Adams is all what was taped there, but. That's 1/11/1985. I don't know if that 11. I've seen it. I know it's on the network. I've watched it. I've seen it. I've seen that match, and I've seen that Shawn Michaels with SEAN Michaels.
Yes.
But I don't know if that was the date that it was taped. At least I don't know if when it aired. But 1/11/85.
One of those two matches, either the Christmas match or the match they taped on the 11th, aired maybe on the 24th of January or something on the TV. I can't. It all gets mixed up in my head, but the point is, if you could find any of the World Class matches, go back and watch them in order. They're tremendous. Those Midnight Express Fantastics matches. You really, when it comes to the Midnight Express, you can't go wrong with anything.
No.
I mean, I was watching stuff the other night and I completely forgot about this angle, but do you remember the James Boys angle? Probably not.
I don't think I do.
This is when Magnum and Dusty put on masks and they wrestled in masks and long black shirts and jeans as the James Boys. One of those angles where the whole world knows, you're not
right. It's obvious that it's those two guys. Yeah. I mean, it is Cornett, Dusty Rhodes, so it's kind of tough to hide. You know?
Magnum with his mullet hanging out the back of the mask, and they're doing like Dusty's throwing the elbows. Like, it's just utterly ridiculous.
And Cornette's like, God damn, you can't tell. Come on.
So Cornette's he's talking shit at the podium, and he's like, we're taking on these guys named the James Boys. We're going to show everybody a lesson in wrestling. So then the James Boys comes out, and Cornette and the crowd goes fucking, the studio goes crazy, and Cornette is going nuts, going, stop the match. This is they're perpetuating the ruse. This is he's going crazy. And they kick their ass, and then Cornette's at the podium with like Shivani, and he's like, everybody knows who he is. And Shivani's like, well, I don't know. These men are wearing masks. He's like,
right,
I don't know. You can't prove that, and then and Dusty and Magnum show up an hour later into the show, and Shivani's like, there's a lot of people who think you've been here in the building today, and Dusty's like, you know what? I don't know nothing about that. He's like, I don't know nothing about that. All I know is I'm concerned about Baby Doll. And then he starts talking about whatever it is he's talking, and they just completely no sell it. But that's the whole James Boys angle they did. That was probably in 85 or 86, I'm gonna guess. But that was a fun TV angle. And the Midnight Express were always great in situations where they had to fly around and bump for people. I heard Meltzer talking about how they went around the loop with Bill Watts and Junkyard Dog. and did all those matches with those guys, and Watts just kicked the shit out of them
I did
for
watch one
18
of
minutes
those.
a
I
night.
did watch one of those, and that's where I gained a special appreciation for Bobby Eaton's bumping ability, because Watts could do almost nothing at that point. Junkyard Dog's starting to really slow down by that point too. So it's pretty much like two guys that aren't going to really run or jump or do much of anything. So it is completely up to those guys, and most of the time Bobby Eaton to just make those guys look like $1,000,000 and basically run into their punches and then fly back and all that sort of stuff. They're pretty fun, fascinating matches. They're not the most exciting matches, but there's some fun stuff to watch inside of them.
Well, Watts had to be old by then.
Oh, and like I think he like tore his hamstring or something. Like you can tell he doesn't move. He doesn't walk. Like he can't walk. So he basically tags in, gets through the ropes, and just kind of throws punches. And then it's up to Bobby Eaton to kind of. It's really Bobby Eaton like literally wrestling a statue at that point with Bill Watts. But it didn't matter because Bill Watts just had to raise his hand up in the air and everybody went nuts. It's Mid-South. It was pretty easy for Bill Watts to get a reaction there, especially, and JYD doesn't have to do much at that point either to get a reaction. So to kind of make the match not a complete disaster, it's just Bobby Eaton bumping his ass off and just working like crazy in it. So yeah, that it was one of those matches where I really gained an appreciation for just how good he was at bumping.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Bobby Eaton was great at everything. I mean, he was just a great pro wrestler. I wouldn't bat an eye if you told me you thought he was one of the 20 best wrestlers of all time. I mean, I may not necessarily, if I had to go through it, rate him that high, but I wouldn't knock anybody who did. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. So they had the match, because I'm obsessed with this topic now. They had the match on Christmas in '84. Then they had another match on January 11th, and that's where the Midnights won the titles back. I know I've seen both. I don't know which one is the one that airs. It's probably the one from the 11th. That would make sense because that's the same show, like you said, with One Man Gang and Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair, Terry Gordy, which I think are the other two matches that aired on that episode of television, which to me is just one of the great 1 hours of wrestling television, of the era, or maybe ever. We talk about 1 hour shows, but that those were two great matches in the span of a month, and I highly recommend seeking those out. Not hard to find at all. Then they had another match. I mean, I had another match in Houston, but I think that was a Mid-South match. Where Bosch was promoting matches in Houston for Mid-South. So they had a bunch of great matches with Fantastics in the state of Texas. That one I don't remember the date. I'm bad with dates. There's some people like you mentioned before, Chad Campbell. That guy can rattle off dates of matches like it's his fucking job. And there's other people who are very good at that. I have never been good at remembering dates. So I sound like a fucking complete idiot when I'm trying to remember when certain matches took place. Like I know that I could see the matches in my head and I know what matches I've seen and I know approximately when they took place. But I think it's crazy admirable to me when I hear people like Chad Campbell or Chris Zellner or Bix or people like that, and they have instant recall of like the date, the name of the show.
Right. I can give you like a rough. I think I'm good at like the rough year or whatever, but I can't tell you May 19th, 1996. You know what I mean? Like off the top of my head. Yeah, that was Slamboree 1996 from, it's like, no, what the hell? Like, how can you do that? It's an art. It's an art form for sure.
Do you know who else is great at that? Pull back the curtain a little. Cody. You ever like we'll tweet something and he'll hop in the DMs and have the date. Like, I know what you're talking about. March 5th, 1984.
Right, yeah, and we're not talking about like major event. He's like, yeah, no, I show like this house this TV taping match from January 5th, 1984 to my students, and we're like, what? Like, how do you know that? Like,
and that might be why he can remember because he's probably got the tapes and the dates on it. It's a little easier for him. But but like Chad, like he just knows the fucking dates. Like he'll go on Twitter and be like, what were your favorite matches from March of 1990? And I'm like, how the fuck do you have answers for that?
I don't know. Give me 2 hours. Give me 2 hours and I'll look it up and decide.
Yeah, I gotta look it up. And but then there'll be people like writing the thread and then they'll have a discussion on it. I'm like, if I could have a like people say, like, what superpower would you like? Oh, I'd like to fly. Fuck that. I want to have instant recall on wrestling match dates the way that these psychopaths do. I am so, I admire that so much because my brain just does not work that way. And then it kills us in segments like this where I'm like, I want to tell people about these great movies.
I try my best, but I am also just like yelling dates out too. It's probably terrible audio for people, but people seem to enjoy it, so that's fine.
Yeah, and then I stutter like an idiot because I can't remember, anything other than the year, So yeah, I don't even remember what we were talking about. I guess the Midnights and the Fantastics, but you really can't go wrong with any Midnight Express matches from any era with either Condrey or Lane. I mean, you're going to accidentally stumble into stuff. And here's the thing, like, if you're like a 23-year-old kid listening to this and you're like, I never really liked territory stuff. I think the Midnight Express like cuts across all eras.
Yes,
I mean,
I agree.
Those aren't the kind of matches where, that are going to look dated or aren't going to, you're not going to be able to appreciate them. I mean, there's no way that any wrestling fan of any level of, experience watching wrestling, you could have become a fan because of Kenny Omega 5 years ago, and you will, and there's no way you can watch that Midnight Express Southern Boys match from that we just talked about and not be blown away by how great it is. I mean, so it's just,
and it's in any era too, like you mentioned. Like I earlier today, I was watching, I think, a 1986 Midnights versus Rock and Roll match, and it's fucking awesome. It's just boom, 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 action, action, action. It's not, if you're thinking, 1986, man, like you're probably thinking WWF 1986. These guys aren't sitting in rest holds for 10 minutes while the crowd slowly gets up or whatever. The bell rings. It's 10 minutes long. Everyone's jumping up and down the entire time. It's boom, 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 tag, 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 sell, 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 drop kick, head scissors, drop kick, tag, finish. The crowd goes fucking insane. It's just, like there's no way you're not going to enjoy it.
With most of the time, flawless psychology.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like telling a different story every time. And, and that's where Cornett gets real hypocritical because, the Midnight Express.
It'd be so good if that guy wasn't a loon. Can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine the audio that guy could do this week if he wasn't such a fucking lunatic?
He's still going to do great audio. Like I am 1,000,000% going to listen to him talk about Bobby.
I just wish he wasn't such a lunatic because he could do audio on a lot of places. But I guess
he just goes off. You can't listen to him talk about modern wrestling. That's all. When he talks about the old shit, he's phenomenal. But where he's hypocritical is in real time. The Midnight Express were criticized by the Jim Cornettes of the day, like the old timers of his day, for doing too much and working too fast and doing too many high spots.
Right, because they did, and it ruled. I could absolutely see Bill Watts telling those guys, "Hey, guys, slow it down a little bit. Who fucking cares? Fuck you, Bill Watts. It was awesome."
And now he's become all of the people who criticized him.
Yep.
And it just, the cycle always repeats. And
we'll be there eventually, I'm sure. So I guess meme wrestling got us for a bit, but we were right in the end on that. So
we were right about meme wrestling. Yeah. It fucking sucks, and now nobody cares about it again. But I'm going to try my hardest for that to never happen to me. I mean, but I guess eventually it happens to everyone. But it's just funny because a lot of his critiques are the same critiques the Midnight Express were getting, and it was the same kind of people who loved the Midnight Express then, or which are the same kind of fans that love all the stuff he criticizes now, the newsletter readers and the hard. I mean, they were newsletter reader favorites. They were the favorites of the Smarks. Why? Because they were advancing the medium and they were doing things that nobody else did. And they would cram so many high spots into their matches, and their matches were exciting from bell to bell, and they weren't working like everybody else. And meanwhile, they were considered too flashy and spot monkeys and everything else by old curmudgeons. And it's just funny to me how Jim Cornette cannot see that. I mean, he was that. And make no mistake, he was every much a part of that act. I mean, this isn't a situation where it's fucking some shitty manager like Paul Jones or Mr. Fuji where
how dare you?
Where
you're Paul Jones. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to do a deep dive where I try to turn you onto Paul Jones. I don't know if it's gonna work, but that's number one Paul Jones, sir. And you always throw him. When you say shitty managers, he is the first one you always bring up. It's never Mr. Fuji. It's never, it's...
I mean,
No.
Fuji stunk too, but like, what did Paul Jones add to any act?
He was number one, and he was Paul Jones. No, you're right. He wasn't that good, but
He added nothing to
it's
any
always
act.
the
He was
first one
in.
you bring up. I don't hate him as much as you do. You have like a visceral hatred. We gotta
I
get
don't
into
hate
that.
him. I just
We gotta get
okay.
into
Listen,
the deep in. There's something there. We gotta get it out.
I don't hate Paul Jones. He just was useless. Like, what did he add to the show?
Right. He had a good head of hair, and that's about the extent of it. So
Like, what did he add to the fucking show? Like Pez Watley can't cut his own promos, right? Like, what did he add? Like, I get like. I don't like. He just wasn't a great match. Like Mr. Fuji, at least would throw salt in people's face, and I mean, I think
get his
Mr.
champion
Fuji,
in unnecessary matches, but yeah.
I mean, I kind of get Mr. Fuji more than I even get Paul Jones. But the point is, pick any fucking Vicky Guerrero today, or just pick any manager who adds nothing. Like Cornett was a vital part of that act, and a very important part of that act, and every bit a part of that act as the wrestlers that were involved in it. And his promos were just he might be the best promo guy ever. Jim Cornette. I mean, he's right there with anybody.
Oh, I put him up. I mean, his stuff is incredible, and it was incredible for decades too. I mean,
it's still incredible.
It's still great. Yeah, I mean, honestly, all he's doing is cutting promos. I mean, he's still a character. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like it infuriates you, and unfortunately, it doesn't. I guess it makes money for him, but it doesn't really build up to any. But no, what he's doing now is and
still working the marks.
Yeah,
right?
He's still working. Yeah, he's always working. It's a character, man. It's not. I don't. The problem is, I think he's kind of worked himself into a shoot where now I think he might believe some of the stuff that he says, or he doesn't know kind of when to turn on and turn off. But I mean, yeah, that it's not different than the original character. I mean, it's still just kind of that. I mean, he's basically what he was in 1997 WWF when he was doing those weird Raw things where he just they give him like a minute and he would say 7,000 words in a minute about how much he hated Shawn Michaels and how Bret Hart was a baby and Hulk Hogan was old and stupid, and like it's the same stuff. Like it's just that, but unfortunately it's with the volume turned up to 10 and split up and consumed by Twitter people and weird odd stands as well that retweet it and tweet him and stuff. So yeah, I don't know, like, but it's still a great promo. I mean, I would put him, man, would I say all time? I honestly think it's gonna get people up. I think he's my favorite promo guy of all time. Going back and watching some of that stuff, it's incredible.
Yeah,
he packs in so much in such a little amount of time.
Yeah,
it's just it's yeah.
And while getting everything over and.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You could tell that he had his notes in mind of, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna build up this event, but like building up to the event. You know what I mean? A lot of Ric Flair promos, and I obviously love Ric Flair promos, but a lot of them are just kind of Ric Flair being Ric Flair. You know what I mean? Just saying stuff, being awesome, being cool or whatever. Jim Cornette is always like, well, this Sunday, this, like I'm gonna show you, and like he's always plugging the show, always plugging the match, always saying everyone's name so you know who's in what match and who. I mean, it's just it's incredible stuff.
Yeah. And I saw, who was it? It was Fuego del Sol, and who's the guy who was doing dark jobs for AEW and got caught making the prank calls or whatever, and they kicked him out and they never brought him back. He's one of Sammy Guevara's buddies. What the fuck is that guy's name?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not a dark guy as much as you are, so.
He does a lot of edgy stuff on Twitter, and a lot of people hate him. I can't think of his fucking name. But the point here is
Joe Alonzo. Joe Alonzo. Is it that
Alonzo.
Guy? Yeah.
I watched Joe Alonzo and Fuego del Sol cut promos on each other on YouTube for a match they had coming up for some indie somewhere.
Oh, is that the one where they never said where it was?
Yeah, and the promos
or when it was.
The promos were good, the intensity and all that, and they were believable. And they never said where the match was, when the match was, what promotion it was for. And I think I quote tweeted one of them or something, and I was like, these are great promos, but how do I pay to watch this? Like, you didn't tell me when or where you're wrestling. That's like the number one rule. Like, what's the point of a promo? To get you to spend money on what you're trying to sell me. And they completely blew that off. They were so focused on being creative and taking shots at each other that they forgot to tell us when and where they were going to wrestle. And I was just thinking about that when you were talking about Jim Cornette always working that in.
Right, and he did a
who
great
he's
job of
feuding with,
yeah,
when they're gonna.
yeah, and he'd set the stage for, last time you and I faced each other, you beat us, but that's not going to happen this time because we're smarter, we're better, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like,
Right.
he would tell you what the story was, build it up, and say, well, this Sunday at Wrestle War 9090, we're going to prove to you that the Midnight Express, and it's just like, oh my god, it's amazing, and it's a mile a minute, like, it's hard to follow sometimes, but that was, you got it, like, you understood that was the Cornett and that was his style or whatever, and once you kind of got it, and hey, we talk very fast as well, so, after our own heart there, but no, yeah, he's to me the all-time promo guy of just getting you in the building. I mean, there's some promos that you watch, like there was one I was watching not that long ago, probably involving the Midnight Express. It was in 1993 when they were doing the weird kind of Smoky Mountain in WCW thing. Remember when he was playing both ends of he was getting WCW to use Smoky Mountain guys and then flipped to having WWF use Smoky Mountain guys like a week later or whatever. It's like the second to last one, I think, where before he's gonna flip over to WWF or whatever, and he's just ranting and raving about WCW and Bill Watts, you idiot, you don't know anything, and it's just like, oh, it's so good stuff. It's just incredible. Yeah, it made me want to go to the building and buy tickets. I'm like, where's this happening? I need to see this.
Point.
Yeah, I want to buy tickets. What is it? Oh, it happened 27 years ago. Okay, well, I guess I'm not going, but damn.
Yeah, and then Eaton ended up in Smoky Mountain, of course. So, and he would did 6-mans with he got involved with the Heavenly Bodies. And the Heavenly Bodies were really just the next incarnation of the Midnight Express for Jim Cornette. It was obviously Stan Lane was part. It was Stan Lane and Tom Pritchard, and then when Stan Lane retired, it was Jimmy Del Rey, which, again, Cornette had another great tag team, which had two different versions that were equally as great as the other, yet different, so he did it again. But Eaton dropped in to Smoky Mountain and did some stuff there late in career. He even popped up in ECW at one point, which actually we're coming up on pretty soon on Jovember to Remember, when Bobby Eaton shows up in ECW for that When Worlds Collide show, not the AAA When Worlds Collide, but the ECW When Worlds Collide, with Bobby Eaton and Sabu against Arn Anderson and Terry Funk. So, Eaton even found his way into places like Smoky Mountain and ECW. One place he never found his way into was WWF. One of the rare guys of his era who just, not even a one-off.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that because I was thinking, oh man, he never worked in WWF, and I'm like, I'm sure he had to do like something, like in somewhere in his early days, or somewhere late he had a one-off and nothing, zero, never.
Well, he definitely didn't have a look that Vince McMahon was going to be into.
No,
I mean, he looked like that would be safe to say. A Southern wrestler.
Yeah. A little pudgy, question. Yeah. And I mean, he could fly, but he never looked like a man that ever did. I mean, not much cardio on his diet.
I don't think he cut a promo after 1983.
No, I don't think so either.
I mean, until he got he did cut some promos real late, like in some of the Memphis reboots in the 90s, when he in the early 2000s, I guess, and late 90s, when he would pop up in some of those Memphis reboots. He cut some promos, but for like 20 years there, the guy didn't even cut. Why would you ever cut a promo if you're like an average or substandard promo and Jim Cornette is your manager? I mean, that's the whole point of having the manager. I mean, there's no reason for you to talk. So yeah, he never and he really didn't seem like he'd really work as a WWF guy in that era. I mean, because he didn't have a great look and he couldn't talk or didn't like to talk. But yeah, I don't think he ever took a dime.
Okay, so this is really weird, and I have no recollection of this, and I'm not sure if it's true. So this is it's archived from IGN.com. I don't know why IGN would have been writing about this, but I think it was in the 2000s. Everybody was writing about this. January 25th, 2001. Former WCW superstar Bobby Eaton has signed with the WWF. It says, from the official WWF website, the World Wrestling Federation is pleased to announce that Bobby Eaton has signed with the company.
Oh,
he'll be working with the Federation's developmental talent in Memphis.
That was Ohio Valley when Cornette was there, wasn't it?
Right. So yeah, I don't think he ever got in the. Did he ever get in the ring at that time? Because I know he would jump in and do some stuff. Obviously, for years and years and years, he would still wrestle. I think he was still wrestling until a couple years ago. Did he ever get in the ring in Ohio Valley ever? I don't know. I'm gonna actually look that up right now.
That, but,
yeah, I have no idea. I wasn't watching my Ohio Valley tapes at that time. Let's see here. Okay, he had 3 matches in Ohio Valley, so
So I guess technically he took some, but who knows? Like he was under WWF contract though, as
Apparently,
like a
yeah,
trainer
yeah,
or something.
yeah, yeah. I think they said he was going to be sent to the Ohio Valley. So I don't know if I don't know if it was like a talent contract or just kind of strictly a developmental contract. But
I'm sure it was just some kind of trainer or
look at
something.
this match here, July 28th, 2001. Prototype Enrico or Costantino, who obviously would become Rico. Prototype John Cena defeats Bobby Eaton and Randy Orton.
Well, I mean,
That's awesome.
if you're a developmental territory and you could have
Bobby Eaton, of course, yeah.
working with these guys, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You don't even think twice about it. And that's the heart of the Cornett era when you're talking about what'd you say, 2001?
2001, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when they kicked him. They kicked him out and said, "All right, you're too annoying. Go away. Go to Ohio Valley." Then he did great because they churned out a bunch of great talent. They told Paul Heyman to do the same thing too. Hey, Paul, you're annoying everybody. Go to Ohio Valley. And then all they did was produce a bunch of superstars. And then they said, "Okay, never mind. Actually, you guys suck. Move on to something else." So, which will actually get us into our next topic when we get into it, as is the transformation of WWE developmental. But we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah. So I completely forgot about Eaton. Short-lived stint as the trainer or whatever you want to call it with Ohio Valley, but I don't think that lasted very long.
Yeah, it doesn't look very. I'm trying to find the exact dates of how long that lasted, and I'm having trouble finding it. So,
yeah, but a great career, great wrestler, an all-time great without question. And I really think someone who would transcend eras, and anyone who hasn't see, I can't imagine many people listening haven't seen a bunch of Bobby Eaton. I mean, how could you avoid it?
yeah, you'd have to actively just not watch wrestling before.
Well, how can you go? How can you be a wrestling fan who somehow finds us and that you haven't watched Midnight Express?
I'm very surprised by that. We do have a lot of people that I'm always like, how do you listen to us? What does the show sound like? If you have never, if you're a person who has never once seen the Midnight Express, what does this show sound like on a weekly basis to you?
How much of it goes over your head?
Right, we're talking about Coco Ware and Dennis Condrey, and you're like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? I mean, unfortunately, because so many wrestlers have passed away this year, every opening segment of our show has to be just complete madness for you because you have no idea what the fuck we're talking about. But I guess it's good that hopefully we're educating people, but god damn it, go watch the Midnight Express matches. What are you doing?
And go watch all of them.
Yes, go watch that Chad Campbell. I'll watch all 62 matches that he recommends. That's what you have to do. That's your homework for this weekend.
Holy shit, before we move on to the Assassin, did you watch? I retweeted a match last night, Bobby Eaton versus Abdullah the Butcher.
No, I wanted to get to that one, and I forgot it completely. And then right before the show started, I was going to watch it, and I didn't get a chance. Yeah, tell me about this, because you were blown away by this.
It's only 4.5 minutes long.
That's about as long as I need to see. That's about as long as I need to see Abby wrestling, so that's fine.
It's so great. Like, it's just this TV match. I forget, it's either from Main Event or Saturday Night, one or the other. And it's just so random. Like, why would Bobby Eaton wrestle Abdullah the Butcher? Yeah. But it's so fucking great, and it just shows you how great and versatile he is because he wrestles Abby's match. Because how can you not? You know, Abby's not wrestling your match.
No. Saturday Night. It's from Saturday Night, by the way.
Yeah, and I don't want to give anything away. Just it's incredible for a sub. It's one of those. It's now on my list of sub 5-minute matches that are must watches. I mean, that's now on it. I'd never seen this match. I didn't know it existed. I woke up to take a piss last night, and of course, you bring the phone, right?
Of course, yeah. Can't possibly do one thing ever without your phone.
Without your phone,
yeah.
So that's how I find out Bobby Eaton died. I think the news must have broke in the middle of the night or whatever. So then I stay up a little while, and I'm just going through, scrolling through Twitter, and the match pops up. And I'm like, it's a 5-minute match. I'll watch this, and then I'll go back to bed. And then, oh my God, it was so fucking good. I'm like, I didn't even know this match existed. I'm so glad I was awake when that came across the Twitter feed. I may have never discovered this match. And then it fired me up, and I stayed up a little longer and watched a bunch of fucking Bobby Eaton stuff before I fell back to sleep. So I'm glad I remembered that because I wanted to bring it up. And of course I didn't write it down, but that's another one that people, and that's, got to be 91 or 92, that era that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
After, Stan Lane had left and the tag team wasn't a thing anymore. That's probably right around that time. Cause Cactus Jack does a run in. So it's got to be like 91, right? It's probably 91. But yeah, oh my god, what a great sub 5 minute match.
Yeah, there's so much that I discovered from that era, and I always, I mean, that's one of the eras that I always, if there's nothing going on or I'm bored or I just want to put on like something in the background, it's usually like 1990 to like 1992 WCW pay-per-views because they're just insane. They just make no sense. There's just a random, just the undercard's just weird, and there's a lot of really good stuff there, and that's where I really gained an appreciation for him as a singles wrestler, and for me personally, I probably prefer him as a singles wrestler, which seems insane because he's obviously an all-time great tag wrestler, but I always value singles wrestling a little bit more. Like I said, I grew up in an era where that was just more important. So there's tag team wrestling I like, but there's people that like they love tag team wrestling. And I'd put you in that category. I think as somebody who grew up in that era of WWF when it was like so important, and you can rattle off WWF tag teams or whatever. But like if you were born in the or if you started watching wrestling in 1985 or whatever, I'm sure tag teams were super important by that time. When I was watching, they were kind of not important. You know what I mean? Like you were in a tag team because you had nothing else to do. So I've always valued singles wrestlers a little bit more, whether right or wrong. And that era, Bobby, I mean, just for whatever, it works for me so much. And I just think he's just so good in those. And like I said, what you can also tell too is that the guys like to work with him because he is working with every one of the top wrestlers in the company is giving Bobby Eaton like these great matches. They're going 15, 20 minutes or whatever. Arn Anderson, Ric Flair, as you said, sometimes it's Abdullah the Butcher too, but it's still, it works in every single case and every single possibility or different like permeation as well. So yeah, that don't skip on that area as well. And I think Chad does have plenty of those in his 62 matches again. So Big Boys Play WCW is the Twitter account, but we'll link it in the show notes as well because you absolutely if you need to know, if we always do the what do I have to watch? Well, unfortunately with this you have to watch everything. You have to watch every match this guy ever wrestled, but you can start with these 62 matches and then go from there. How about that? Is that some okay homework? 62. That's not bad, right?
A couple weeks.
Yeah, you can get. I mean, they're not. I mean, there's no 60-minute Iron Man matches in there.
These aren't New Japan main events.
Right, you can get these pretty quickly. 10, 15, 20 minutes tops. I mean, you could do these pretty quickly.
Yeah,